Neurodiverse voices are being heard and could change the face of the electoral process forever, championing a movement that could lead to a tsunami of fresh voters in November and beyond is our friend Layla Luna, founder and CEO of Just Be. We're also joined by Zoe Burch, Voter Services Manager for the Charleston County Board of Voter Registration and Elections. Great to have you ladies with us and welcome back.
Thank
you
you.
have been a busy lady. I mean, ever since we started talking about the license plates, and I mean, talk about a tsunami. You've been championing a tsunami of change as it relates to the neurodiverse community. Specific to the elections, we have, at least 5 million voters, voting age Americans who are not casting their ballots, but their voter registration. It tells a different story. Tell us more about that.
Correct. I mean, when you look at the spectrum of autism or neurodiversity, you're looking at, sometimes we think of the children, the early diagnosis, but we're not talking about the adults. We're not talking about how when they age out of the system, which we call the cliff, but you've got 1 out of every 45 adults in America that are on the spectrum that are autistic. And their voices are not being heard. This is so important. They have the same right as every other American to be part of that process, to be heard, and also just to know that the autistic lives and the neurodiversity individuals or that are neurodivergent, that they matter.
Sure. And how are you going to change that? So how are elections going to change? Because, you know, when you think about, all right, well, if you don't want to stand in the long lines, you've got absentee ballots, you also have early voting. Do any of those help at all, or is there something that more needs to be done?
Well, I think everything matters and will be helpful, but having sensory-friendly hours to come vote, to early voting, and also we're going to have sensory bags. We're going to be training the individuals that are working these polling booths. We want to have as much education awareness. We're going to have the beehive, which will be at some of the polling booths, you know, to make sure that the families know and the individuals know that they can come, that they are welcomed, and if the process is a little bit more difficult for them, now we're going to make all these arrangements to make it easier and effortless for them to be able to come in, feel welcomed, but also to cast that vote.
Right, right. And I want to talk about the younger ones who are not quite voting age, but how that impacts their caregivers and parents. But Zoe, when this was brought to your attention, I mean, what did you think? Was this something that the Electoral Board ever even thought about in the past?
So accessibility is very important to us at the Board of Elections. I think it's very easy for a lot of elections boards to say, there's not a lot of people who are coming out who do have a disability. We need to focus on our voters who are neurotypical, not neurodivergent. But I think, especially for early voting, that we have made it a priority to focus on our training for people who have disabilities. And one thing that I'm very thankful for is Just Be, because a lot of times the focus is physical disabilities, not people who have autism or people who are neurodivergent.
Right.
So it has been a great opportunity to work alongside them.
Yeah, indeed. You know, ramps are wonderful, and having things that are accessible for wheelchairs and the blind and the hearing impaired and all of that, but really do forget about those who have those other needs. And can you talk a bit to those needs, Layla, because you as a mother of an autistic son, his needs, he can walk just fine, but it's something altogether different. So how does the environment around him impact his mood and just how he lives in the world?
With a child with autism, it's so difficult. I mean, once you wake up, the day is pretty much dictated by how their mood is. And being also, we have to consider the nonverbal community that's autistic. You know, 40% are nonverbal. So even being able to come in and say, you know, where do you live, what's your address, they wouldn't even be able to communicate that. So we want to put that into play also, that we're going to have communication boards, we'll have lanyards for the nonverbal. It's very difficult. If my son is having a hard time, or I would not be able to wait in line. I would not be able to be in a safe space where people wouldn't be looking at me. So honestly, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't vote. I'm like, who's going to be able to help me navigate through this process? And do I want the judgment? Voting should be your right. It should be something that you've studied the candidates and you're going there to be part of that process. But who wants to be the unicorn and have everyone staring at you and feel that there's a lot of pressure, that you just kind of don't really want to have that negative experience? And so we're trying to come up with that solution that these families will be able to navigate and be able to vote.
So how does all of this come about? Because we're now a little more than 50 days away from the election. We've got early voting in some states already happening within a matter of days. So where does it begin? We're telling the public about it now. It's happening right now in Charleston County, these changes. So where do people go? What do they do? How are things going to look different, and where and when?
So for early voting, that starts on Monday, October 21st and goes through Saturday, November 2nd. And we're going to have 7 locations. The B is going to be at 3 of those locations, but all of our early voting locations will have sensory bags, and we are making sure that we are doing training specifically for dealing with people who are neurodivergent or who have autism, so that everyone feels welcomed.
That's wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations for working so hard and tireless.
you.
I can tell you this lady never sleeps. Zoe, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this. Is there a website that I can direct people for more information?
Well, for Just Be, it's Just Be, like a bumblebee, the change.
Okay,
And for anything related to elections, it's chsvotes.gov.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies. Great to
Thank
have you with
you.
us. We're back
Thank
after
you.
this.